But let's talk about something that you put up on the site, Mike. It's underrated players, which is always a good off-season topic.
Great off-season topic
to hit on.
And it's something that we at PFF, I feel like, have sort of tried to unearth. They've been better at unearthing over the course of our career, over a decade plus of doing this, because you'll see guys who consistently grade well, or up-and-coming guys who have graded well and just haven't gotten their dues, that sort of thing. I think we're good at identifying those players, cutting through the BS and the hype.
Yeah, it's the beauty of the system, right? Mm-hmm. Once you're actually recording and taking down everything, every play on or action on every single play, you get a better idea of being able to quantify guys as opposed to just sort of working from box score numbers or highlight reels or just what you remember from the game. When you start quantifying it all, you start to be able to point to these guys that don't necessarily have the highlight plays or don't necessarily have the stats, but are playing at as high a level as some of the people that do. Mm-hmm. So who do you want to hit? Who do you want to talk about from your list?
Well, let's just go position by position and kind of throw through who I put, and then who else we else think is up there as well.
All right, the quarterback is interesting because it's a position that everybody feels they have a great handle on anyway, but also because the player that you've gone for, I think, is one of the more polarizing quarterbacks in the NFL. You've gone with Russell Wilson.
Yes, and I think it's because what gets underrated about him is the way his legs impact opposing defenses. Why everyone points to, they run the ball so much over the course of his career. They've always had a great defense, great running game, but they don't realize that he has been a massive, massive driver in the fact that they have a great running game. They used option runs more than any other team in the NFL last year. The Seahawks did. That is why they had one of the best run games in the NFL. That's why they averaged 4.8 yards per carry, is because on option runs, they averaged 4.8 yards per carry. On all other run concepts, they averaged 4.3 yards per carry, and then his scrambling brought up their yards per carry as a team as well. So he is a big driver in that, and when he does pass, one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the NFL, even though he doesn't pass a lot.
Right, and the thing that's different about him when it comes to what he does on the ground in the run game is he's able to do it essentially without exposing himself to hits.
Yes.
Like, it's not so the biggest concern for decades with quarterbacks and why the NFL always stayed away from those college style option quarterbacks is, you can't expose your quarterback to those kind of hits because they're going to get hurt and then you're screwed because you don't have a quarterback. It doesn't matter anymore. So then the NFL started to go away from that, and you started to go, well, okay, it's worth the risk now. So you get Cam Newtons, you get Lamar Jacksons, you get even a Carson Wentz. You get these guys that are so dangerous with their legs and so dynamic as athletes that it's worth risking them to take advantage of what they can do. But almost all of those guys take hits and they get exposed to injury because of it. Cam Newton in particular, even though he's huge and a monster in the run game, it's breaking him down. But Russell Wilson is able to do that, and he may be the best quarterback in all of football at avoiding taking hits. He will get what's there, and then he'll hit the ground.
And that is a big part of certain option runs with the quarterback, just the normal read option. You are out in space and sort of you can see the hit coming and then protect yourself. You can slide, get down, that sort of thing. A lot of stuff to do with Cam Newton. They're running him between the tackles, using him as a battering ram. You're not as protected there. That's a little different than how they use Russell Wilson. But that is a big thing to it. You're not, when you are in the pocket stepping up into throws a lot of times, some of those pocket passers are going to be more injury prone because you're not being able to protect yourself. Wilson moves like a running back, has the speed of a running back, so he can, when he gets out into space, protect himself and get himself into favorable situations where he's not taking the big shots. And he has, it's been the pinnacle of health over the course of his career.
Yeah, it's definitely not, like for like comparing him with Cam Newton and what Cam Newton is asked to do by the Panthers. Yeah. But Wilson is also exceptionally good at understanding. He's got a really good feel for when I can make a guy miss versus when I'm going to get hit. I need to hit the ground. So, he'll see him juke guys out of their shoes. Whereas, it's a one-on-one shot. The guy's got a pretty good chance of making a hit on him, but he knows I can make this guy miss. Versus, no, this one's actually going to make a hit. I gotta hit the ground.
Yeah, definitely something for Kyler Murray to be watching. Wilson's tape on how to protect himself there, because they're very similar athletes in that regard.
And he's also one of the more fascinating quarterbacks because kind of like Aaron Rodgers, you have this thing. Anybody that does things in a different way to everybody else, a Tom Brady or a Peyton Manning, it's pretty easy to see the dynamic at work. They stay in the pocket. They don't do an awful lot. There's not that much to work with. It's just sort of how much pressure's coming versus what you could do to mitigate it. But with an Aaron Rodgers or a Russell Wilson, they play the game in a slightly different way that changes how all of that stuff works. So for years, you've had this idea of the Seahawks offensive line has been terrible, puts Russell Wilson under a ton of pressure, but then Wilson also causes a lot of that pressure himself.
Yes.
And I think because he is a short quarterback, he will deliberately start to move around back there to essentially manufacture himself some windows, some throwing lanes to be able to see downfield. And you get these situations where it would be a clean pocket, but he wants to start shifting people around, starts to run around, find some space back there, and then ultimately makes a pass off the back of that vision. But anybody that I think has that different dynamic at work, it causes it polarizes people, right? Because some people are going to see that as a bad thing. Some people are going to see it as a good thing. And it's just this interesting discussion point with him versus other quarterbacks.
Yeah, it very much goes back to that, if you guys have ever read Andy Benoit, his sort of dichotomy or his contradiction that he was having to face with Russell Wilson, why he was so down on Russell Wilson. But he was like, if I'm a defense coordinator, I would hate to face Russell Wilson because there's no game plan for some of the stuff that he does. I think that's where offensive coordinators and a lot of times quarterbacks like him have gotten pushed on boards in the past, and I think are coming around to that style of quarterback is that because they can't control that. You want, as an offensive coordinator, you want to be able to control it. You want them to go to A to B, run their offense. Russell Wilson, that's not going to be him, but you live with it because he's so darn good at making plays. And I mean, it's just been so consistent over the course of his career, his grading profile, that at this point, if you're still not on board with Russell Wilson being one of those, 6 to 8 quarterbacks that legitimately will give you a good offense every single year, no matter what's around him, you're never going to be on board with that.
He's also got a pretty spectacular deep ball. Mm-hmm. He's got that kind of Dante Culpepper style of pass where it just drops in. Yeah, the rainbow drops into the bucket at the end of it all. To Tyler Lockett, he's got this stable of receivers. Typically, they're not the sort of 6'5" guys that are winning jump balls. They're just catching these beautiful rainbow targets deep down the field. What else we got? We got running back James White, the Patriots.
James White. And so this one, the Patriots get, like the running backs for the Patriots get sort of every year they're interchangeable. The Patriots running backs, right. They're just a cog in the system. And to some degree, that's running backs just as a whole. But James White, there's a reason why he's been there for 5+ years now, almost 6. This will be his 6th year in the NFL, and they haven't signed through 2021 is because his receiving ability, what that brings to the table, is just changes how opposing defenses, what they can do to opposing defenses. They can go from this big, heavy formation with 2 tight ends, a fullback, and James White to then 5 guys spread out wide the very next play in a no-huddle offense and just create mismatches. 87 catches last year, 751 yards. He's, half wide receiver, half running back. And I think that's where guys can really bring value to the table at running back. Everyone looks at him as this replaceable sort of cog in the system. No, he can run legitimate wide receiver routes and actually catch passes out of the backfield at a high level. I
think any Patriots running back is probably going to end up being underrated because of the way the Patriots do that, they sort of break down the backfield by roles. I need a receiving back. I need a power back. I need, they have all those different types of running backs, and they sort of split up the time between them depending on what the game plan is. Consequently, it's like, well, this guy can only do that. Mm-hmm. Whereas James White can run the ball. He can run the ball between the tackles. He can run wide. He can catch it out of the backfield. He is a really good running back, but people see him as just the receiving back there in New England, whereas someone else.
Whereas just a receiving back is also kind of what
it's also
you want.
The most important thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think James White, we've seen before in big games that he is a really talented player and the guy they lean on at times, Super Bowls.
Exactly.
He's been the guy that's carried that team at times. What about wide receiver? Tyler Lockett, the recipient of the Russell Wilson.
So for a similar reason in that they don't pass in Seattle. Obviously in the Brian Schottenheimer offense, they have been the most run-heavy team in the NFL. But Tyler Lockett, on a per snap basis, on an efficiency basis, far more efficient than a lot of other receivers, a lot of other bigger names around the NFL, even though he didn't have 1,000 yards. Had a perfect passer rating when targeted this past season and averaged more yards per route than Adam Thielen, Juju Smith-Schuster, that's a mouthful, Brandon Cooks, Robert Woods, Antonio Brown, Stephon Diggs, a lot of bigger names. He was more efficient on a per-play basis. Top 5 last year in deep receiving yardage. There's one of the best route runners in the NFL. Tyler Lockett, if he was in an offense like Pittsburgh, like a high-volume offense like the Packers even, he would be a lot bigger of a name.
Tyler Lockett is one of those players that I regret so much that we just didn't have the confidence
to really get on board with,
to really push him that first year. It was the very first year we'd done college grading. Tyler Lockett's grading was every bit as good as Amari Cooper's.
Yes.
And really, those are the two guys that had the best grades. It was Amari Cooper and Tyler Lockett. And Lockett's problem was just size. He was like 5'10", 175 or whatever it was. Tiny guy. And you watch the tape and it didn't matter. He was making contested catches. He was winning jump balls. He was getting wide open, which is, the thing that is most important these days. Him and Amari Cooper were the two guys that did that the best. And it looked like this stacked wide receiver class. You had Cooper, you had Kevin White, you had Dorial Green-Beckham, you had Funchess, you had all these big receivers, even guys like Nelson Aguilar, significantly bigger. You had this, what looked like a loaded first round of wide receiver talent. And then you had Tyler Lockett, whose grades said he should be a first rounder along with them. And I think because he was just so small, we kind of shied away a little bit.
And also in an offense that really does not produce a lot of passing yards. It is a run-heavy offense there at Kansas State, has been for years, never really produced any high-volume wide receivers, and he produced a ton in that offense still.
So he's been the same guy essentially in the NFL as he was in college. And the grading pointed us in that direction. We just didn't quite have the confidence to push it the way we should have. If we had that time to do over again, I would love to be out there saying Tyler Lockett is right up there with Amari Cooper as the best wide receiver in this class.
Yeah, but
it's one of my lasting regrets, Mike.
We have a lot of those. Hopefully not as many going forward though.
It was year one of the system.
That is true.
We didn't know what it meant. This is the first year we had NFL or PFF grades on these NFL prospects. We didn't know how much stock to put in that. This guy's got a fantastic grade, but we know the physical ability and size and speed and all that kind of stuff, it matters to some degree. We just didn't know how much and where to put that. So it was all a learning experience. What about tight end? We got one more offensive weapon, Gerald Everett.
Gerald Everett, Los Angeles Rams tight end. Get to know the name. Perfect for that Sean McVay offense in that they don't use the tight ends a lot to block in line. He's more of an H-back, 6'2", 240-ish range. And they use him to come across formation and basically cut the backside end a ton. He can do that, does that very well. Is a very willing blocker in that regard, willing blocker out in space. And then after the catch is where he actually separates himself. 5 broken tackles this year and only 33 catches. One of the best broken tackle rates among all tight ends. Actually trailed only George Kittle, Vance McDonald, and Javid Njoku last year. So he's great after the catch. Good hands, only played 503 snaps, so his raw totals aren't going to look great, but with more volume in that offense, I think Gerald Everett is a name to know going forward.
Yeah, I'd love to see him with a kind of massively expanded role in that system and see what he can do with a sort of full-time workload, particularly as that offense develops this year, because it's going to need to create some additional wrinkles. It's going to need to find a plan B after last year. I think that's the big thing for that system generally is we started to see last year that there have been systems in the NFL before that have come in, taken the league by storm year one, and then stalled because they didn't change, right? This is the system. Then eventually NFL teams figure it out. And once they take away plan A, you need to either evolve or you need to have a suitable plan B to take advantage of what they're trying to take away. So I think last year we started to see towards the end, teams start to take away what it is the Rams want to do, and plan B it never really looked like it existed, let alone was effective. So I think this is a big year. And obviously, Plan A was so devastating that everybody goes out and hires a Sean McVay disciple. Now half the league is stuck with this offense. If it doesn't have Plan B, or if they're not able to evolve it, like half the league just made a pretty bad decision.
I think it is sound offensive principles the way they go about calling a game in terms of the bunch formations, the outside zone heavy, and the play action heavy scheme. Those things are sound principles that are going to work everywhere. Now, I think there are things you can do to counteract a lot of things you do in the pass game with those tight splits, with trips and bunch formations. But a lot of it still will just work and is good sound football, and that's why it's trending that way. That's why you see the proliferation of their offensive minds and offensive guys who know that system.